Hello and good afternoon. I'm Talib Zuma, Program Manager, Ethics and Governance at Center of Excellence Responsible Business, Serve, Pakistan Business Council. I'm certified compliance and ethics professional from Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics, US, and a graduate of Transparency International School of Integrity, Lithuania. I'm also a member of United Nations System Staff College on Anti-Corruption, Germany. I'm the moderator of this webinar today and very excited to have you all. I would like to welcome you all in this webinar, Integrating Ethical Practices Across the Supply Chain. This webinar is being held in collaboration with our partners, Business Integrity Initiative, British Deputy High Commission, and the ACCA. Under the ambit of ethical practices, which is one of the strategic goals of SERV, this is the series of activities of the project Ethical Mindset from Vision to Practice. I will come to this point at the later stage of my presentation. We had conducted the first webinar and workshop in April 2018, and the next workshop on ethics and governance is being held at LUMS Lahore on July 24th. For more details, please check our website www.pvc.org.pk/Center of Excellence Responsible Business. I'm very excited to inform you all that over 400 registrations we have for this webinar, which shows people interest on this important topic. I'm very grateful to have the presence of eminent speakers. We selected very fine names in their domains to enlighten our attendees on this important topic. We have tasked them as based on their rich experiences and learning. Starting from Sajid, would like to give the introduction of the speakers first. Starting from Sajid Aslam, he's head of ACCA Pakistan. Being as a knowledge partner, he will highlight ACCA's partnership with SERV and BDHC on this initiative, and also share the perspective of ACCA on ethical practices as integration, particularly in the supply chain. Also, we have knowledge expert Jonathan Shibafa. He's head of business integrity XEJ. The company assists organizations worldwide with practical advice and technology solutions to prevent compliance breaches, respond to risk, remediate major issues, and monitor ongoing business activities. Being as a knowledge expert, he will set the tone by bringing international perspective and share situational analysis, pressing issues related to unethical practice in supply chain. And he will also share his experience of working with multiple countries and sectors and bring motivation to have ethical practices as a business case. And last but not the least, we have industry practitioner Mirza Mohsin Baig. He is Vice President Training Supply Chain Association of Pakistan, and he was a former head of procurement, General Tire and Rubber Company. And this very important role, he will discuss industry perspective, his experience and challenges of managing supply chain at world-leading oil marketing companies and prominent leading national companies in Middle East and Afghanistan, Pakistan region. I'm very excited to know from him what are the top issues in supply chain management and what should be the best practices to mitigate those risks. I'm sure you have their profiles with you. If you don't have the document available, please access their biographies. A document is attached in the handout section of the tool. So starting from the agenda perspective, some ground rules I would like to elaborate to you all that this is a 90 minutes webinar. Sajid Aslam will be speaking for 10 minutes, followed by the knowledge expert presentation and presentation by the industry practitioner for 20 minutes each, and then we'll move to the question and answer session. I'm sure you all are muted, but for the safe side, please mute your microphones to avoid any kind of echoes. During presentations, you are welcome to post your questions. Please type your questions in a chat box given at the right-hand side of the tool. I will collect your question and ask on your behalf in the end of the session. Please note, due to very good number of people registered with us, I just came to know that it's crossed over 400. So we cannot answer all the questions at the same time, but we will consider the most relevant questions. However, you are welcome to share your questions, feedback to me over the email, so I will take them to the relevant speaker. So after that, we'll move to some introduction. what I'd like to share my thoughts about the ethical practice supply chain, why it is important. The survey which we conducted recently with ACCA, ethical mindset, some of the survey findings, and then followed by the speaker session. And then the last, we will take the question and answer session. So quickly, SERV's introduction. Center of Excellence in Responsible Business is an outreach initiative by the Pakistan Business Council to build capacity and capability of medium-sized enterprises. SERV assists Pakistani businesses to pursue economic, social, and environmental value creation. SERV comprises of online research and innovation initiative and two interdependent business units, which we call them Ethics, Values, and Governance Forum and Inclusive and Sustainable Development Forum. We are running by 6 strategic areas of focus, which are creating livelihood, gender equality, environmental stewardship, sustainable systems, ethical practices, and transforming business culture. One of the drivers of the with my perspective about working in this ethics and anti-bribery and corruption for the number of years, one of the drivers of the globalization of business had been the increase in global sourcing by companies in the developed world. Global sourcing is a fact of business life, comparative in cost, and I believe is skillful in nature as well. One of the important features of today's business is protecting the integrity of the brand. In an ethically conscious environment, companies that refuse to accept any responsibility for the practices of their suppliers run the risk of damaging their brand and value of their businesses. I would like to share the Institute of Business Ethics. The thoughts shared by the Institute of Business shows that to run a successful business, companies need to ensure that their relationships with other companies and individual suppliers are sound and secure. Talking about the particular risk, not only in terms of commercial risks, but also in terms of ethics risks. So the question is why ethical practices supply chain is important. Compliance Week 2019 survey cited that the most likely reason a third party will fail to meet an organization standard is a general reputation or integrity concerns. Highlighting my thoughts again on why it's important to have those practices, 100,000 or even tens of thousands of supply chain power your company every minute of every day. Supply chain relations are become complicated. Some of the reasons are low enforcement, lack of training, not having oversight, absence of monitoring mechanism, or maybe a code of conduct in place. That means the supplier's code of conduct as well. The businesses with supply chain, it's not only an opportunity, but the risk as well. Business through third parties globally is typically responsible for driving approximately 60% of the total revenue. On the other hand, third-party partners are the number one risk areas for companies, as 12 Ernst & Young fraud survey shows that the 90% of foreign corrupt practices act cases involve third parties. So, I'm focusing on here the right supply chain, which actually prove into practice that if thoughtfully evaluated, managed, and controlled, deliver what you contracted for and serve up many opportunities to be better. One of the important studies conducted by Loyola University Chicago Supply and Value Chain Center, the people were asked how important to your organization is supply chain ethics. So over 83% of the respondents say that the supply chain ethics is very important for them. About asking the question, how important are each of the following to your organization at present times and present time in 2 years, 74% of the people say that safeguarding and against anti-corruption is very important now, and 77% believe that it will be important after 2 years, followed by the responsible labor practices, environmental sustainability, and defending the human rights. Ethical Mindset project, coming back to the project which we started this January. We initiated this project, Ethical Mindset from Vision to Practice, with ACCA and later joined by Business Integrity Initiative, British Deputy High Commission. I'm grateful to have this collaboration in developing understanding of the private sector knowledge and existing framework on ethics and governance. This is a year-long project, comprised of baseline survey, practitioner workshops, best practices guide, and designing of application. The ultimate objective of these collective efforts are to motivate companies to have ethics officers in place in their organization to perform ethics management tasks and to design a supplier code of conduct as a monitoring tool of practices. In a survey on ethics and governance, a separate section is devoted to highlight practices of working with business partners, third party. Section F of this particular survey identifies tools used to implement ethical behavior in companies, existence of anti-corruption policies for the third parties, what mediums have in place to communicate key information to third-party vendors, suppliers, and how companies redress third-party issues and which department is which officer is actually responsible to redress these issues. So to support the webinar topic, I am bringing survey of finding of two sections only. You can access the complete report from the handout section. The report in the PDF format is available for you. So asking the response on tools to implement business ethics practices for supplier vendors. 53% majority of the respondents believe that suppliers code of conduct can be a best response as a tool, followed by the suppliers audit, trainings, surveys, and helpline. About the third-party issues and their redressal, 74% of the organization says they have medium in place to redress those kind of issues with suppliers, vendors, and third party. What is the best medium? What is the responsible department? What is the responsibilities they have to redress those issues? Majority of the companies reported that they have the proper committees in line to provide guidance and redress those issues, followed by the dedicated email, ethics officer, and contract renewal time they discuss these kind of issues, and compliance and global operation. You can check the complete proceedings and all the details of the survey findings in the PDF format, which is attached to the handout sections. So this is all from my now. With that tone, I'm summing up my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, please do email me at talib.zaman@pbc.org.pk. We will share the webinar recording and the presentation, which is also attached in the handout to all of the attendees for this webinar. So now I'm handing floor to Sajid Aslam, who is head of ACCA Pakistan. Sajid, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you, Talib. Thank you very much.
Great. Now floor is yours.
Okay, so can you move the slides?
Sure. Is it okay, Sajid? Can you see my?
Not yet, but let me know if the slides are there. I can use mine.
I will change accordingly.
I might be.
Sajid, we can see your first slide.
Okay, you are on the first one because I can't see slides right now as we speak. Just to go back on a very fundamental. So my name is Sajid Aslam. I'm head of ACCA Pakistan, and ethics and governance is the one of the area which is very close to ACCA as a qualification, and it's very close and important for Pakistan specifically. Based on that, like Talib earlier mentioned, we created a partnership between PBC and ACCA, and then British High Commission as well, in terms of creating that awareness where we stand, what we are doing, and how we can really help within the business community to create that capacity and character which can help implement that in a real term. So we are talking about not the theories, we are talking about really implementing and practicing some of the frameworks which can help the supply chain or ethics and governance in general. So just to share a little bit background, Talib, if you can go to slide 2, ACCA is conducting a lot of research on the ethics side and trying to understand different phenomena and behavior which exist out there. And one of the behavior is particularly which we are studying is how the things are changing in the digital age. We are also trying to understand the impact of unethical behaviors in terms of the citizens' lifestyle, how it's impacting the infrastructure and how it's creating the infrastructure gap. There's a separate study which we conducted on a supply chain that how the late payment impact the SME sector and how, and that is not only from the government side, but we are also talking about the making a late payment by the private sector to the smaller vendor and how it's impact the society and the businesses itself. And then definitely the role of accountants, the value gaps which we are trying to understand. So all these research paper, and there are very few which are trying to explore and providing a response that how the business should conduct themselves and make sure that overall our capital, whether we are talking about the intellectual capital or a natural capital, or we are talking about the businesses which are associated, they should be safeguarded in terms of their existence and growth. uh, Talib, if we can move to the next one. For that, we conducted some of the events, some of the area on a global ethics day as well to create that awareness and really bring all the members and the key policymaker on the table and build that conversation. PBC is always one of our key partner in all those conversation, and we are hoping that with the participation, we can create a certain impact in the society. Uh, Talib, on the next slide. In our studies, it shows that 66% of people were placed in a situation where they have faced an ethical dilemma. And that ethical dilemma can range from a one employee issue, and that can range from a dealing with the vendors or dealing with the government. It can go on any range, but 66% is quite a high number if we compare the situation which people have to face in their daily life. Another finding which I would like to share with you, Talib, on the next slide, in terms of the infrastructure. So if you see this chart, you will see some areas which are pointed out with yellow. And that yellow area on a blue bar, it's showing the impact of corruption, which is the biggest barrier in terms of meeting the infrastructure need. And when we talk about the infrastructure need, we are talking about a fundamental school system, we are talking about road network, we are talking about the systems, procedure, the basically something which government or public sector is supposed to deliver as a value to its citizen. And if you see this particular chart, you will see a very low level corruption barrier in North America, and you will see a very high uh, uh, corruption as a key barrier in Central and Eastern Europe, South Asia and Africa, and the Caribbean region. And you can go back and see the type of infrastructure and type of the citizenship services which exist within those regions or these countries, and the corruption is one of a key barrier for them not to progress. So that's why we have to understand the corruption impact not only on the private sector but on the entire value chain which it creates, even by the government or whether it's take place in the private businesses. Talib, if we can move to the next slide. From an ACCA perspective, whatever we do, technical and ethical competency remain at the core of our professional skill, and that's what ACCA is all about. So we talk about IQ, EQ, creative quotient, digital, emotional intelligence, the vision for the future, but everything emerge from a very fundamental thing which is called the ethical competency. So that's what ACCA is all about, and just giving you a very small framework. If we really want, and organizations are really keen to implement the ethical practices, Talib, if we can move to the next slide, uh, that is around the leadership, the capacity and character which the leadership has to showcase or demonstrate, and that's the policy framework which we expect leadership to bring to the table, creating an ethics committee at a board level, defining the code of ethics and conduct on a various segment, including the supply chain, then the training and the manual that how to really report it, how to really understand that there's a dilemma. Sometimes it's very difficult to really understand that there's an ethical issue. the whistleblowing or a speak up policy, and then the disciplinary process, which should be transparent and robust, which is a right response, that how we should punish or hold accountable if there's an unethical practices. And just from an implementation perspective, uh, if you can move to the next slide, Talib, uh, the communication and awareness campaign within the organization and the value chain. So not only the organization, but to your customer, to your suppliers, to your employees, everywhere, even to your stakeholder and the shareholder, there has to be a very clear communication and awareness that there's an ethical committee and there's a process, and what does it mean, what is the right conduct which will be rewarded, what are the conduct where the people will be held accountable for, training and reinforcement, supporting the context and the culture. So culture is also important, and then monitoring and accountability. This is the ultimate item which is important, that if we do everything but we do not monitor and we do not hold people accountable for their behaviors, then the entire foundation which we have created, it's not going to work. So monitoring and accountability is one of a key area. Just to sum you, that's my last slide. So just to sum it up, the ethical practices and the governance is important in the entire business. Supply chain normally represent most of the business activity which are taking place, either through the distribution to the customer, or we are talking about acquiring or procuring services and goods. So the entire supply chain become more relevant to implement the ethical practices and the governance side of it, just to ensure that all the stakeholders who are involved, they should not be deprived from their fair share, something which they should be entitled for if the practices undertaken are ethical. And then ultimately beneficiary will be the final consumer, where the company or organization would be able to create the maximum value. And if we bring it in the society as a behavior or as a practice,
Hello. Hello, Sajid. Can you hear us?
I think Sajid's connection has gone bad. Talib, if you can continue with the next presentation.
No problem, no problem. Thank you very much, Harun, and thank you very much, Sajid, for your thought-provoking presentation. Taking the thought discussed by the Sajid, I would like to, taking the agenda forward. But before that, I would like you all to read the Supply Chain Management 2016 review report. This excellent report shares incentivizing ethical behavior, setting standards, and control of the contract are the key strategies for improving suppliers' integrity and relationships between the suppliers and the company. So now let me hand the floor to our knowledge expert, Jonathan Shibapa, to share his thoughts. Hi, Jonathan. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect. Fantastic. Over to you now. The floor is yours now.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you everyone for joining, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you today. Now, very briefly on my background. So I am a barrister by profession. I spent 7 years practicing at the England and Wales Bar before joining the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline. And a lot of you may know GSK because they have a very strong presence in Pakistan, actually. So Pakistan is a region and a country that I have a strong interest in. And being Zimbabwean, I think Zimbabwe have played more test matches with Pakistan more than any other country. So we've got that link as well. So having spent about 5 years at GSK, I joined Tesco, which is a big retail company here based in the UK, with operations in a number of countries in Asia, including Thailand and Malaysia. So my experience as a compliance anti-bribery risk professional extends to a number of industries and also a number of international countries. and I joined Exeger about a year ago. Exeger is a London-based US-led consultancy firm specializing in risk management. We advise a number of banks and a number of corporates on managing third-party risk by using technology to save time, money, and effort. Now, the aim of this discussion with you today is really to leave you with a good idea about what the expectations are of a company based in Pakistan, for example, by a UK-based company, or indeed a company that is subject to not just the UK Bribery Act, but to the US Foreign and Corrupt Practices Act as well. And I hope that what I leave you with is not just an idea of what's expected of you, because you can know that by just looking at the legislation, and that's quite a straightforward thing to do. But then what I hope I will leave you an impression with is how to be able to demonstrate that you are being compliant, you are being ethical, you know, what's required to show evidence that you are a business that is conducting itself in an ethical manner. Now, the starting point is policies and procedures, and at this stage, we'll move on to the next slide, please. Now, first of all, it's important to understand what are the areas where you have to demonstrate that you have very clear and unambiguous policies and procedures. ABC, so anti-bribery and corruption, very, very important for obvious reasons. I mean, the legislation itself is front and center in relation to that particular risk. So clearly you will need a bribery policy that is very clear, as I say, unambiguous and consistent with the requirements of not just the UK Bribery Act, but as well as the US legislation as well. And of course, what's interesting about that is that very recently you've seen an expansion of the extraterritorial legislation around bribery to extend beyond just the UK and the US. So you're seeing the French, you're seeing Argentina, you're seeing Mexico coming up with legislation that is extraterritorial and in line with what we've seen from the US and the UK in the past. So ABC, very important. Anti-money laundering, very, very important indeed. Sanctions, another very important area. Modern slavery, again, we are seeing an expansion here in the UK of what the authorities expect companies to be compliant with as far as preventing certain risks from occurring. So we're moving on from just bribery, we're seeing modern slavery, we're seeing anti-tax evasion, and that's a very new one here in the UK. So again, I would say if a Pakistan company was able to demonstrate to a UK business partner that they were that there are measures in place to prevent tax evasion, that would demonstrate currency of knowledge and would provide additional comfort, in my view, to a UK business wanting to partner with a Pakistan company. Now, again, looking at modern slavery, labor practices become very important. There are a number of issues that do come up in the context of doing business in Pakistan. Just as an example, around child labor, for example. So if you are able to demonstrate a robust policy that is very clear on prohibition of that sort of labor practice, of course, but also to say how it is that you police your supply chain to prevent the risk of contamination with issues like child labor. Another important area, I would say, for policy and procedures is around whistleblowing. It's very important for you to be able to demonstrate what are the measures that you have in place to enable people to speak up in your organization. It's one thing having a great suite of policies and procedures, But if there isn't a system in place that enables people to speak up when they see things that are going wrong, I'm afraid that kind of falls short of the standard. So having a very clear whistleblowing policy is very important indeed. Now moving on to training and communication, it was touched on earlier, but it's really important to understand that having an amazing array of policies and procedures is all well and good, but if the substance of those policies and procedures isn't effectively communicated, if your employees are not trained to understand and appreciate the significance and meaning of those expectations upon them, that makes your program rather ineffective. So you've been given advice and assistance, and you've got this amazing set of policies and procedures. You then need to really think about how you effectively communicate these to your employees and key stakeholders, and that you train the relevant people in understanding and implementing those policies and procedures. Now, the training part is really important, but it's also nuanced in a way. So who's being trained? Having everyone trained in the same way once a year is no longer, I think, what's seen as the expected standard. What's more interesting, and what I would encourage you to focus on, is to understand who of your employees and stakeholders presents the highest risk for you from an ethics and from a bribery perspective, and make sure that the training that's given to those people is bespoke to the risk that they face, is targeted to the activities and the risks that come across, that they come across in the course of doing business, because that demonstrates a mature approach and a way that is really targeted towards the risks that those people face. Communication, very, very important. How often are the messages coming across? Who are those messages coming from? If you are a big enough organization to have a compliance officer, you may consider that actually such a message around compliance and around ethics shouldn't just come from the compliance officer. Is there evidence of the CEO getting involved in messaging? Is there evidence of the commercial directors getting involved in ethical messaging? I think what we find when we advise clients and talk to clients is that, and actually what we're seeing from regulators as well, in terms of when we speak to them about how they see these things, it is felt that messaging has to come from the commercial leadership of the organization. It is not just compliance's job to speak about compliance. And so where the message comes from is as important, frankly, as the message itself. And that takes me nicely to the tone from the top. It's super important to demonstrate that the leadership of an organization is clear about what's expected of their employees. I suspect that in a lot of negotiations that you will have when you are entering into an arrangement with a UK or another multinational company, you will have your CEOs and your CFOs, your senior commercial guys involved in those discussions. Now, if they are speaking about compliance in a very clear and meaningful way, that not only inspires confidence, but demonstrates this requirement of tone from the top, which filters down, because as we all know, culture tends to permeate from the top. And so I think being able to demonstrate that there's a clarity of speaking and communicating from the top is really important. Now, discipline and enforcement. Now, clearly, things do go wrong. Good people make mistakes, but the point is here to be able, as a company, to demonstrate how you are responding to the consequences of wrongdoing. there's no point having a system that does capture misconduct and then nothing is done about it. And this is not about making an example of people or naming and shaming people. Clearly, there are a number of reasons and legal obligations around that area, but it's about being very clear that the consequences for misconduct are severe and following through on whatever policy you have in relation to corruption or such misconduct. Because frankly speaking, if people do the wrong things, if that behavior is not responded to in the correct way, it will simply continue unabated. And I think it's a really important demonstration of how tolerant or not a company is about wrongdoing, looking at how they respond to such issues. Due diligence and monitoring, hugely important. Now, of course, in the context of many of the companies that we advise, for example, who are UK-based or based elsewhere in Europe, they are being compliant with legislation and regulatory requirements that mean they do diligence on companies such as yourself. But what's really interesting, I think, about this is, of course, the supply chain extends beyond your relationship between the, say, UK corporate body and the company such as yours. You being able to demonstrate that you've done your own homework on your own supply chain is, I think, a very important way of demonstrating how seriously you take these issues, but also that you are a company that is functioning in an ethical and acceptable way. So the due diligence that you do on your own third parties is extremely important. It's also important how you approach that process and how you document it. Because frankly, without displaying evidence of it, it may well not exist as far as a robust compliance program is concerned. Now, the key thing to all of that is understanding what level of diligence you need to be doing, on whom, and in what way, how frequent are you supposed to be doing this? And that requires a real risk assessment process, so you understand that you are doing what is proportionate and necessary. Because there's no point spending loads of time and resources on doing due diligence on third parties that are not exposing the requisite level of risk to you. So each and every organization, I would implore, has to have a risk assessment to understand where do their highest risks lie and what level of due diligence should they be doing on those particular third parties that expose them to that particular risk. And frankly, depending on what you do as an organization, you may find that, well, actually, maybe there are not many third parties that present that risk to you, and what your focus should be is to demonstrate to your multinational partners, multinational company partners, that you've done your own homework internally and that your own processes and procedures are up to scratch. So I'm not in any way saying that everybody should be having some sort of robust third-party risk management platform or system. That may not be the case, but at the very least, do conduct a risk assessment and consider that position. And then in terms of responding to problems, I mean, that sort of goes back to the, in a way, to the discipline and enforcement. But more importantly, it also goes to where there have been issues identified, what have you done to address those issues? What have you done to mitigate the risks, to close the gaps, or to at least conduct a root cause analysis to understand how those problems occurred? Because actually, I would say people would be more impressed by a company that says, we have in the past identified some issues, because it shows that there's a system in place for monitoring and reviewing the situation. And we've done X, Y, and Z to address those issues. That's a lot more compelling in my view and impressive than somebody who says, yes, it may be true that we function in a country that has got a high corruption risk, but actually we've never ever encountered any problems at all. It's all fine. I think that probably would present as being less credible than being able to demonstrate that you have conducted your risk assessment, done your diligence, identified problems, and responded to them in a way that's proportionate to the situation. Next slide, please. I mean, this is just a fact of life, I suppose. Increasingly, budgets are becoming smaller, and yet regulatory expectations and obligations seem to be increasing all the time. And this is a real challenge. You know, how do organizations then demonstrate compliance, ethical conduct in a world of fewer resources and more regulation? And frankly, what we've seen working, and we could move to the next slide on this one, please, is the use of technology. So whether it's technology for screening third parties, for having your policies and procedures in a place that's accessible to your employees, that when you conduct your training, it is recorded, it is auditable, and if someone comes in and says, can you please tell us how you are coping with your diligence, with your training, you're able to present information in a very quick and effective way. And what we are finding is that what can be relatively small investments in technology and in getting advisory support can actually, in the end, add such value to your proposition. And frankly, it's worth, we would argue, the investment in doing it, because the benefits that you get from demonstrating your ethical conduct, your standing as an organization in the long term will give you commercial rewards that will far outweigh any investment that you've done in your processes and in your systems. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now hand over to the moderator, and I believe there'll be questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. It was a wonderful presentation. I especially like the points on enhancing the business integrity. I'm sure listeners have taken many takeaways from your thoughts and presentations, and the learning you have shared the multiple countries. It's really impactful. So thank you again. So for the questions to our attendees, I would request you all to please post your questions in the comments box available and the below side of the webinar tool. Please do post your questions, so I will take them forward at the end of the session. So before moving the floor to our last speaker, I would like to share the survey pointer by Nevex Global on monitoring third-party relationships, which actually set the tone of the industry practitioner presentation. The survey shares that 71% of respondents indicated they do not track information on some or all of their third-party relationships, which exposing, I believe, themselves to significant ethics and compliance risk. As you know, monitoring and evaluation can be helpful to minimize those risks, which is also shared by Jonathan as well. One of the ways can be to place a monitoring document to address the raised issues. Same point actually we have picked in our survey as well. So we have Mirza Mohsin Beg, our industry practitioner. Mohsin, hello, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, Talib, yes.
Fantastic. Mohsin, as per your perspective of working in Pakistani market for the long time, over 20 years out, if I'm not wrong, how would you like to endorse the knowledge shared by Jonathan? And so floor is yours. Over to you now for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Talib. Thanks a lot. It was wonderful listening to Jonathan. And initially, Sajid also mentioned a very critical point. I'll dwell upon that during my presentation about this late payment by the organization. So this was like people don't take it very seriously, but organizations don't take it very seriously. But this is very, very crucial and critical for the companies. So I'll dwell upon that during my presentation. Can you just move on the slide, Khalid? Yeah, that's my introduction. I think you have already given the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining in and listening to all of us. My name is Mirza Mohsin Beg. I have been in supply chain, I would say from the start of my career. Started off with companies like Shell and then moved around the world with Shell. Have been to different countries and different exposed to different cultures and have been able to learn how things look in different perspective and everything has a different understanding in different cultures. So I have started my career as buyers and logistics officer and then moved around and left Pakistan a couple of years back. I'm currently based out of Canada and working with organizations to improve supply chain compliance and competency in supply chain professionals. I'm also a member of various organizations, which is APIX USA. I'm a certified supply chain professional by background, and I'm also working on local and chapters with the Supply Chain Association of Canada and Ontario. So, Talib, can you move on to the next slide? So top issues as we see in supply chain world today is, as also mentioned by Jonathan, frauds and bribery. Another thing is conflict of interest and the modern day slavery, which also was the topic of Jonathan. Talib, can you move on to the next slide, please? As we can see, fraud, most of the time people, they all know, but fraud, what is the definition? By definition, fraud can be defined as a dishonestly obtaining an advantage, avoiding an obligation or causing a loss to public property or various means during procurement process by public servants, contractors, any other people who are involved in procurement. And bribery, we all know, but by definition, bribery means giving or receiving an unearned rewards to influence someone's behavior. One common form of bribery is kickback, an unearned reward following favorable treatment. Both are corrupt practices. Corruption is an unlawful and improper behavior that seek to gain an advantage through illegitimate means. And again, bribery can be of any form. Even in some cultures, they don't give you bribery, but in Japan, as we read in various textbooks, even losing a golf game falls into the ambit of bribery. So this is again something based on the culture, like to losing a game against somebody. You just give them a feel of ego. So that's also kind of that falls into bribery. Ali, can you move on to the next slide? Conflict of interest in procurement. This is another very important aspect. A situation where personal or business interest of a party could adversely affect the outcome of the procurement transaction. So most of the time, people unfortunately in our culture, people don't understand what is a business and what is a personal gain. So sometimes they just mingle it, mix it. But if you go into other cultures, you will get to know that even when you are running a business and even when you have a personal account in a company, whatever you do with that particular account, when it goes to the, like if I can give you an example of Canada, there is a Canada Revenue Agency, and that Canada Revenue Agency, they just look at how you behave with your personal accounts even. So if there is something which is coming in, you are liable to pay taxes accordingly. Even in the practices and supply chain, conflict of interest could be giving a contract uh, to your brother, to your friend, to your cousin without realizing that you might be thinking that this is for the benefit of the organization, but ultimately this conflict of interest is something which is giving you a benefit either to your family, to your friend, or a kind of negative impact to the business. You might be thinking at times, people in organization, they think that, okay, I have done a big favor to the organization, but that is actually not the favor to the organization. This is opening a door to malpractices. Khalid, can you move on, please? This is, one of the most my favorite spiral of ethical risk. It all starts, as we can see from the blue line, the close cooperation, and the spiral actually, you don't feel, you don't just think of what is going on. If somebody tells you in the beginning that, oh, your organization or your organization has having a corrupt practices, unfortunately, or you get to know that, okay, some organization has started some corrupt practices, they infamous to take bribes or kickbacks or whatever. But when you look at where did it actually started off? So the opening gate is the courtesy or the close cooperation. Courtesy goes into the business dinner, then goes to the seasonal gifts. Like, some people don't even mind that, they are getting seasonal gifts of various kinds, and they don't even report it. And exclusive dinner with partners, then going into free services, uh, nice business travel. We all hear that, in Pakistan, all the pharmaceutical companies, unfortunately, we hear that. There is no proof, but we all hear that, all these annual conferences of doctors are happening in, Bangkok or some other places. So, but all those things are actually, holiday trips, amount of money getting, and then everything goes into right to get money. Then ultimately, we are all getting into that corrupt practices and corruption. So we have to put a very strong iron gate, I would say, at the point where this is courtesy or business dinner, and then we'll definitely discuss and develop on these topics. Talib, can you move on to the next slide, please? Modern day slavery, we again, as a practice in Pakistan, very few organizations have started to learn and started to practice, the child labor protection. Most of the companies, previously, I can vouch for, like, for the last 20 years, we have been into different organizations, different places where we want to see, how things are coming up. And even I can tell you this 2009 World Cup, Football World Cup. I was, exposed to an environment in Afghanistan where we wanted to get the footballs, handmade by organization. Ultimately, we got to know that, okay, there are companies who are actually giving all those things in writing that we are not into child labor. But when we approached them or surprise ordered, we got to know that, okay, kids are involved in making footballs by hand. Girls are involved, and they are not paid properly to that. So all those things you have to understand within the perspective that modern day slavery is happening around the world, and it is only thing that you have to use your, proper looking glass to observe the signs and to observe what is happening around. Talib, can you move on, please? So all these modern day slavery facts, if you can see around the world, you have so many places where it actually, this slide actually gives you all those facts of how many people around the world are victim of modern day slavery in the last 5 years. What has happened in Africa? 2.8 out of 1,000 people are, based on this. We see all those companies who are into, this. I was reading an article about how these companies who are into the business of making batteries are in, the cadmium actually, which is coming, which is a major source of a battery, or iron battery, is actually getting done through some Chinese companies, and they have those people who are doing all those, by hand. So child labor is also there, and the modern day slavery, again, as it comes around, it will definitely, you have to look for, and all those things, which is like uh, forced labor and forced, marriages. Even in some cultures, people bring in people in the name of their spouse, but they're actually not spouse. So luckily, this is not happening in Pakistan. But at the same time, we have to be very aware of what can go wrong in organizations where we, as supply chain practitioners, we are actually, forced to get the price down, and the competition are actually, we are focused mostly on how to keep the price or how to keep the, cost of getting the product in house has to be down. But at the same time, we have to look at what is, what can go around the society. Talib, can you move on to the next one? So the industry best practices is develop and live, walk the talk, business principles and code of conduct. I'll ask Talib to show later on in this presentation the business principles and the code of conduct which we used to use in Shell during my time, and this is still it's a live document. Anything which is happening around the world that keeps changing and the code of conduct remains there. Uh, we always talk about having a whistleblower in the organization, but we have to have to have a whistleblower protection policy in place to encourage reporting. Most of the time, people who report an incident, they are from the very low echelon or like organizational level. They know what is happening on the ground. When they try and report, they have been they become the victim of report. So we also, as managers, as leadership team, we also need to put a whistleblower protection in place. The modern day slavery, I already told, like regular vendor orders. Sometimes we just tell them that okay, tomorrow is the visit, or day after tomorrow, next week is the visit. So everything goes hunky dory, and when you visit them, you get all the tick in the boxes. But unfortunately, that tick in the box doesn't solve the problem. So surprise orders are definitely just to see what is happening when your product is being prepared or when the product is being made. Tender board and tender committees in place to avoid individuals being too obsessed. That's one of the things which leads to corruption somehow, unfortunately. But that some of the people in the organization, they are made so powerful that they can make all the decisions. I'm not talking about the leadership level, but definitely at every level there would be some people who feel like, okay, I have the power to assign a contract or a business. Now that's the point where we need to take out all those elements out of that, to make it a tender committee or tender board or a place where it's a collective decision rather than, and then maybe the manual of authority is also a good practice to have, wherein a person can assign at a certain level. So don't give a junior executive a value assign capability of like 5 million. So it definitely it's not right. So everything has to go as per the limits within the organization. Uh, During my practicing in Pakistan and anywhere, dealing with supplier is something which we need to understand. When we are dealing with suppliers, there are certain times when we, out of our very polite nature, out of our very humble personality, people have humble personalities, so they give some sign which are actually not intent to do, but suppliers actually take it otherwise. So when dealing with suppliers, there are certain items which I have written down, and decline to meet with prospective bidders one-on-one during a procurement action. Don't meet with them one-on-one. You absolutely have a problem. And then business should be conducted during the normal working hours. Don't go beyond the normal working hours. This is another, take it as an advice from your elder colleague or a mentor, whatever you feel like. Uh, Visit meetings with suppliers should be within, at least within minimum of 2 staff, so that you are accompanied by one of your team members. At least you can take some minutes of the meeting. Meeting should have an agenda and minutes. Visit to be suppliers to be followed by a report. Sometimes we do visit a supplier and out of nothing, like you got unfortunately, like there are practices that you are getting late and then you just give a call to your boss that okay, I'm going to a supplier visit. That supplier visit has to be followed by a report. Then organizations should come up with an again a process or procedure that anything which is going through a supplier, there should be a report after that. Maybe a kind of a template which you need to fill in and very simple to follow, so that people can, it's like a sales report most of the time. Sales guys, when they visit the organization, just turn it around, make it for your own organization as for the suppliers. An updated list of black and gray listed suppliers. We usually use the word blacklisted suppliers. Sometimes there are gray lists which you don't want to do business with, but at the same time they are not being deactivated in your system. So try and put the gray list there as well, that these are the suppliers which we don't want to and why you don't want to, and then preferably have a list of top and low performers so that you at the end of any audit or end of any year you can at least show the result that why you are not, because there are certain suppliers who would come back to you or your senior colleagues or somewhere in a social gathering. Like I used to work for ABC organization, and I used to do a multi-million rupee business before, but all of a sudden somebody came in, and this is again a kind of, some people put the words in such a way that it just points out on a single person that okay, somebody joined in the company. I had a problem with this guy in my previous organization, and then they make a story, and then they just, so it is a good idea to keep a list and update that list, keep on updating that list. And an independent body within the organization, like one more thing is, how do you induct suppliers in your organization? Is it one person doing it? Is it a group of people doing it? Or is it like just, bring in forms, fill in the blanks, get people in? So what I have learned and I have practiced in one organization is an independent body within the organization or even outsourced to verify the supplier existence and to avoid procurement teams opening an account for a ghost supplier or a backdoor entry. So there are possibilities that companies have suppliers, and one company is having the same office there and with a different name. So they are they are registered. There is a common practice. I don't know what happens now, but there was a common practice that some suppliers have a tax. With the tax, if you want a tax receipt, they will give you the other company, and the same office having a different company altogether. Or maybe one office address is used by multiple people. So all those things are actually, you can put again barricade against for them to get into your organization, and regularly inculcating the core values and practices in your organization. And it's again, as very well pointed out by Jonathan, that there is a difference between having a policy and practicing it. Tick in the box approach has to be replaced with walk the talk, because you can get a tick in the box, you look very nice on paper, but when something happens, when you go for a business internationally or within your organization or ethics and compliance registration, you definitely will see something which is going absolutely wrong. And one more thing which I just wanted to dwell upon is, as mentioned by Sajid, is the late payment. Actually, organizations don't realize that the late payment has a boomerang effect. You delay a payment to the supplier thinking that okay, we can finance department or any other department, they can get a late payment to the supplier, but they don't understand that within a while or some after some time, those suppliers get to know that okay, certain organization has a policy of payment after 90 days, or let's say 120 days. So they say that we are going to pay you in 60 days or 45 days, but they actually pay in 90 days. So that is the financial charges they start applying on their invoices. And then one more thing which happens on top of it, that which is again out of practice, when the point of contact for a supplier is the procurement professional or the procurement person or the supply chain person. When people go back to finance to ask for the supplier, they are being treated as if they're giving a favor to the organization. Actually, they're not giving the favor to the supplier. They are actually trying to get the favor to the organization by not letting the financial charges applied on their purchasing. And another thing which Jonathan dwelled upon is mentioned is that some organizations, they have due diligence policy which is like risk assessment. I would just say that you can have your own risk assessment uh, in such a way that you have the probability and the impact. So probability of having an incident, and then its impact in financial or social or the image of the company, and then multiply this. So you might get a risk assessment profile for your organization, and then there are certain levels which you can just ignore the signs. Some of them, if this is something happened and actually happened within last 1 year, within 6 months. And I can give you an example of we used to do in Shell that every business unit head used to have a dossier which is to be submitted annually or quarterly for, as a report that, okay, is there any incident of bribery happened? Is there an incident of, a gift of certain value happened? Is there any, pass came in for a game, something like that? And then if it has happened, that has to be reported to the manager. If it is, reported and then certain mitigating steps have been taken, then, ultimately this is a residual risk which is left. And last but not the least is just one point that there are certain internal audit departments in organization, and I always take internal audit departments practices. I'm sorry if I'm going to hurt someone, but sometimes their behavior is like, people in Pakistan definitely relate to my analogy. Uh, they behave like a police officer or traffic police officer standing after the signal. So when you break the signal, actually you are caught committing a crime, rather than having a compliance officer, which gives you, which makes you walk the talk, and which gives you a kind of an understanding that, okay, what is ethically incorrect, what can go wrong, and the regular practice, like, we do for safety for the organization. We used to do a lot for ISO 9000 registration or certification. Same thing can be applied for having, all these things uh, for the ethical compliance. So, Talib, can you move on to the next slide, please? Uh, Talib, can you try and open uh, one of these documents, the code of conduct?
Mohsen, is it okay if we can send those documents
Yeah,
separately in the
please.
email
Yeah,
for the attendees?
that would be okay. That would be
Because
absolutely
we
fine.
are running out of time because we
Sure,
have a,
sure.
yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. So move on to the next. I think these are again the documents you can share with the people. Move on again. These are some PPRA, Pakistan Procurement Regulatory Authority. This is the website. You can go and have a look at the website and see what is applicable on your organization. These are guidelines to look for. You don't have to apply each and everything because this is for the bigger organization, but there is always a bigger guideline you can take away from for your own organization and develop your own guidelines accordingly. Talib, can you move on, please? Yeah, that's all from my side, and thank you so much for being listening to all that ethics and compliance things. Thank you very much, Talib. Over to you, Talib.
Thank you very much, Mohsen. It was a well-rounded session. I completely agree that what the talk business principles and code of conduct should be good if followed properly as our best practices. Also would like to share that OECD has published a due diligence guidance on responsible business conduct. It's a very good document which shares the necessary practices required to conduct businesses across the board. So you can also share, you can also check and share this document as well. So I will also have the link and will share it with the email as well. So now I'm moving to the question answer session. So we will try to answer maximum questions as we can. So we have a question to Jonathan. Jonathan?
Hello.
Jonathan, yeah, I have a question for you. That there are two very prominent anti-corruption laws: the UK Bribery Act and Foreign Practices Act. So, addressing particularly as anti-corruption and bribery issues in supply chain. Which of the laws you can say addresses more, and which is the most in stringent one, or the most in the most highlight the anti-corruption bribery practice, especially talking about the supply chain perspective?
Sorry, which is the more?
Which is the most strictest in terms of implementing the anti-corruption bribery policy, which addresses the anti-corruption bribery policy, particularly the supply chain perspective?
Look, I think both laws obviously have extraterritorial application, and so and both laws will create an issue for if a third party acting on its behalf does the wrongdoing. So it's a very significant aspect of both laws, is the fact that they can be committed through the act of third parties, which is partly why we're obviously having this discussion. But an interesting difference, though, is that the US legislation is slightly tolerant of facilitation payments. So facilitation payments are really small bribes. I mean, that's the proper word for it, frankly speaking, which is small amounts of money that are demanded by officials for what are routine services. So if you want your passport to be processed quicker, or your driving license to be granted quicker, you pay, £5 or £10 here and there. But the UK law actually is strictly prohibiting of those facilitation payments, and so that's a really, I think, important difference. That under the UK law, even the small bribes are positively prohibited, whereas the US legislation, as I say, is slightly more tolerant of those sort of facilitation payments.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Mohsin, can you hear me?
Yes, Talib.
Okay, I have a question. When you are doing cross-border business, don't you think it will be difficult to address ethical practices? It was asked by Anwar Kashif Mumtaz, one of the attendees of the session.
Yeah, Talib, I think it's more it's much better to. I think it's more convenient to apply all those international ethics and compliance issues when you are doing trans-border businesses. So I think internationally, what are acceptable compliance things you have to inculcate, you have to keep in mind. So when you are doing trans-border business, definitely this is with some framework. So use all those international frameworks which you can. It's always better to avoid problems happening after you've gone to a business. So it is better that before you put into your into any business, the terms of references should be in place, keeping in view the international aspect of any business.
Okay, thank you, Mohsin. Another question to you, because you shared the risk management practices. So TPRM, the third-party risk management practices, it's a buzzword nowadays. So what should be the starting point if any organization is interested to implement TPRM in this organization? Can we have some sort of guidelines available? Can you provide some motivation to the companies and some sort of checklist available, some documents available, Mohsin?
Talib, definitely may not be now, but I'll share with you, and you can share with the forum later on. These are available.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Jonathan, another question for you. I think you can better answer this question. It was asked by Mohammed Rehan Aziz. He says that ethical aspects are subjective and can't be measured by straightforward controls. But in the era of modern technological systems, are there any analytics or systematic tools available to embed with the organization system, identifying exceptions that need to be considered for review for ethical concerns? Jonathan?
Sorry, if I can repeat the question, was are there any tools available to support? Well, yes, absolutely, and there are a number of them. One of which is our own tool, but there's absolutely there's quite a few, and that's a discussion we'll be willing to have with anybody who is interested in this space. Because again, I think it's important to make sure that when you do adopt something like that, it is proportionate to the risks that you face and to your activities as a business. But that's absolutely something that we'll be happy to have frankly, just a discussion about. But yes, absolutely, there are.
Okay, thank you. Another question is anyone can answer from both of you gentlemen, that in implementing ethical practices in the supply chain, how often do we need to offer trainings to our suppliers, particularly talking about the training to the third-party vendors and suppliers? Anyone can answer.
Jonathan, you want to answer that? Or I can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, look, I mean, there's no stipulated requirement, but I think at least annually would seem to be proportionate. And if for any reason, such as a particularly risky third party conducting a particularly risky activity on your behalf, you may do it more than once a year. Or if you are doing it because you're responding to a particular issue, then you'll do it in response to that issue, regardless of whether you've done it already in that year. But that's my thought on that.
Mohsin, would you like to share something?
Yeah, just to add what Jonathan has said, rightly agreed with all the points, but just there is no stipulated number of times or days of, but keeping a hand on all these issues. I think regular supplier engagement by the leadership team, at least a quarter, once in a quarter, it's good to have, so that people, they within your organization, they also know that okay, the leadership team has a visible commitment, and the suppliers also know that okay, if there is something wrong, we have some place to go. So you can have all those training sessions, or informal meetings or formal meetings arranged with the suppliers quarterly,
Okay.
annually. Yeah.
Look,
Talib, it's
I've
Sajid
been on
here.
the
If I
same.
can add something.
Sure, Sajid, sure.
Uh, I think when we are talking about the the overall supply chain and the procurement, and definitely there are policies and the processes, but I think we cannot, like there was a question around the technology, we cannot just formalize the existing practices in a new way. So if we are talking about a cultural change, so definitely the technology is a big help, where you might not even need to contact vendor as frequently as we used to do. Then the segregation of strategic and the operational buying, then the spend analysis and going in a bulk and going with initially Mohsin also mentioned that there is a procurement and the bidding process. I think the process with the technology can change a lot. And then the segregation of the buy from the procurement perspective, I think it's important to really segregate the supplier, who are the strategic one and who are uh, the operational one, and then the authority and the effort and the level of risk should be assessed accordingly. One
Perfect.
thing which
Yeah.
I always encourage, and I'll suggest the same thing on that, we as a businesses, we should also, that's our responsibility and comes under the corporate one, we should also give a certain space to the startup and the small vendor. So with our help as a big organization, because we can bear the risk, we have to develop them, and that will create a different kind of emotional and the business relationship. So like in ACCA, normally we prefer that our 20% of the spending should go to the vendors who do not have an established business. But now has to come with a different type of risk profile. So it's not promoting the risk. This is by default a policy to make sure that smaller vendor has an equal opportunity to become part of the bigger pool going forward. So I'm sure that I know there are other organizations who also follow through the same process. So we have to keep those room where the people or a supplier may not be as agile or documented as we would like to see them now, but we can help them to get there. So that's a value chain concept we might need to introduce by using technology and our policy as well.
Thank you. Thank you,
That's a
Sajid.
very
Yeah,
well
very.
put point. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. Thank you, Sajid, for your well-crafted answer. Questions are still popping up, but we are running out of time. We have only 7 minutes left to end this webinar. So I'll try to take these questions forward to the relevant speakers, and we'll get back to you accordingly, because I have questions in front of myself. Thank you very much, all the attendees. On behalf of SERB, ACC, and BDHC, thank you very much for joining this webinar. A special thanks goes to all the speakers who took their time and efforts for this webinar and make a very huge value addition in terms of knowledge, in terms of adding best practices into our knowledge as well. It was actually my pleasure moderating this session. Just in case if you missed earlier, we have planned our second ethics and web governance workshop on July 24th at LUMS Lahore. It is a full day event, comprises of thought-provoking speaking sessions by industry champions, panel discussion, and hands-on practitioner workshop by the ACCA. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Talib, for your help, and Jonathan and everybody. Sajid, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.